Wonderful. And
Yeah.
hello, Barbara. And today is November 21st of 2024.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely to see you again. After a long gap, we haven't talked to each other for I
Yes.
don't know how long, quite some time, isn't it?
We did have a couple of conversations which I kept thinking I was recording and which were failing to record. So it's even longer for the folks who are interested in
And I
our.
don't remember the themes either at that stage, So, but I can see that, I get your emails and you're obviously very busy, and I have friends who are coming to and friends and trainees actually who are coming to some of your seminars. So that's great to hear. Yeah, so you're busy.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm less busy than I was. I'm trying to cut back a bit, which is good. Yeah, yeah.
To get more time for yourself, more
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I was 75 a few weeks ago, so it's time to ease up a bit. Hopefully, we'll see.
Wow. Are you continuing? What have you cut back?
Individual work, that's the
Uh,
main thing. And I'm not going to the Irish camps this year. And I'm doing my last two visits to Romania next year. So two major things. Well,
yeah.
three major
Great.
things. Yeah. And
Wow.
as you know, I gave up the journal, what is that, 2 years ago now, something like that. So I found a home for them, which I'm very pleased about. There's Tanya, the Real Academy is going to store them for me, so that's lovely. It feels like they got into a good home. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's such amazing collections of.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't just throw them away or
Mm.
put them in the bin or anything. They had to go to a good home, so I'm pleased I found somewhere, which is good.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'm grateful for all your contributions in there that I often refer people to. Yeah.
ah.
Okay, so we've come up with a couple of themes. Which should we go with first?
Let's go with this truth thing first, because I'm very interested. Before we began the recording, Barbara said, I have started speaking my truth. And I was like, Barbara, as long as I've known you, you've always spoken your truth. So I want to know, what is this next evolution?
I mean, for me, it's layers of truth. Like there are people I can absolutely speak my truth 100%. And then there are other people where I kind of mold it. It's still the truth, but it's, given in gentler language and that sort of thing. And then there are people it's very difficult to speak my truth to, so and most of it is family, but recently it was a neighbor. So
Oh,
neighbor just really hit the roof with me because I dared to speak my truth to her, and is now what's that word? Stonewalling me, not speaking to me. So I'm doing my best to hold her in my heart because I know that she has a lot of problems. And I'm hoping that at some point I will get to the place where I can, I don't know, leave a bunch of flowers outside her door or something like that. But I'm not there yet. I'm still angry. I'm still angry. And it's all over territorial stuff around our garden, So yeah, she's got herself, well, I think she's got herself in a twist about it. And I just said what I thought, and that was not well received.
so how has telling your truth this year different from telling your truth as you were when you were editing the magazine, for example, the journal,
I,
for example?
I think I'm just less careful. Uh,
Uh-huh.
I don't like being careful. And I mean, there are things like people buy me a present, and I think, oh, you know. And in the past, I've gone, oh, thank you. And I go, I'm really sorry, but this is not for me. I'm really sorry, and I'll give it to a good home or something like that. So that's changed, and sometimes they're hurt. And with my daughter, I mean, we've always been pretty honest with each other, but it's kind of gone to a whole other layer. And she said, which very good for her, she said, if you're going to be that honest with me, I'm going to be that honest with you. I said, good, good. I look forward to it. So
It's right on. Yeah.
that's an interesting one. I'm still working on my daughter-in-law. That's not so easy. And my son-in-law. It's like I've tried. But when you sort of feel you're on different planets somehow, you get to a certain level of meeting point, and then you can't get any further. So that's a bit tricky.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my two brothers, we over COVID, we went like that for quite a long time. My older brother particularly speaks his truth and always has, which I value, but it's also very hurtful. But we've worked together on that and continued to speak our truth, but agreeing we won't talk about that subject and we won't talk about this subject, those sorts of things. Like, no way that I would talk to them about Trump
T-Pain.
or Robert
Yeah,
Kennedy or anything. So, well, maybe that's all right, that it's not that you don't speak your truth, it's that you just skirt around certain subjects.
right.
So it's a journey. That's how I see it. And, I realized with my trainees, I'm always saying to them, speak your truth, speak your truth. And I thought, come on, yes, you have always spoken to your truth to some extent, but there are layers. There are layers. And of course, family is the most difficult to do it with, but I
Yeah,
always remember Hunter, bless him, saying many years ago, most of our problems in life are because we didn't say what we needed to say, or we didn't do what we needed to do at the time.
and from the beginning.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Like they're all what I call unfinished gestalts. We
Yes.
didn't stand up for ourselves and with ourselves. So,
Yeah.
well, it's time at 75 to do that. So that's what I'm doing much more of. So yes, it's true that, I've always spoken my truth to a certain extent, and it's got me in a lot of trouble many times.
I have a neighbor who got divorced, and I was like, "Oh, you got divorced?" And he said, "Yes." He said, he said, um, my wife is in menopause," he said, um, she's a changed person. And I thought, and I thought, oh, there's something about menopause, about getting older, where you're just like unwilling to suffer fools.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great. I think that's very healthy. Speaking
Mm.
of truth, I mean, I also remember my father-in-law having a stroke.
Oh,
And
yeah.
after his stroke, he suddenly became really emotional. He'd been quite distant. And my mother-in-law was like, he started crying, and I didn't say hardly anything to him, and he started crying. And I
Oh,
said, well, maybe that's a good thing.
yeah,
So it's interesting, isn't it? What
yeah.
what truth is about and who you can speak the truth to and who you can't.
And where the truth is in inside of our brain, because we have a judgmental truth. Just as because you're talking about your father-in-law, this is what I thought of it. We have a judgmental truth, but
Yeah,
we also have like a vulnerable truth in the that's in the right hemisphere, the
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that's such
And
an
those two are kind of very different, aren't they? I've been
mm,
talking to trainees about that, how the judge, and I hadn't thought about this before, like the judge can kind of protect you from going into really painful feelings. So let's put the judge in front, and then I don't have to look at it any further. And I
yeah,
hadn't seen that before. I thought that's a really helpful thing to kind of realize, that actually, yeah, the judge is not just a negative thing to get rid of. Actually, it's trying to serve us in some way. Yeah,
mm, mm.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's so much easier on a brain level with the chemicals that flow with judginess. It's so much easier it's like self-replenishing. Resentment is an ever self-replenishing cycle.
that's a nice word. Self-replenishing. Okay, I like
Every
that.
every time we ruminate with our resentment, it gives us a shot of dopamine. And then we get to do it all over again. It's never resolved.
Oh, actually, so it's bad for us to resolve it.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then, of course, the movement to mourning. There can be other, deep truth movements too. There's certain kinds of rage and
Yeah,
terror.
yeah, yeah.
But mourning is one of the huge ones that once we move there, it just transforms the brain.
Right. Say a bit
Yeah.
more about that.
Well, once we're able to mourn, there are two things happening. One is we're naming a very deep and vulnerable truth about our sorrow, but also whatever's happening in the moment that's letting us mourn is accompaniment. We're not able to mourn all by ourselves
Right.
unless we can accompany ourselves, which is something that comes with self-compassion and with constellation study and practice. We
Mm.
begin to be able to accompany ourselves. I can cry alone now in a different way than I used to be able to cry alone.
Mm.
When somebody's with us and going, well, of course you're sad about this, or of course there was alarmed aloneness, then and we have the ability to cry or just to feel sad. I mean, I remember Dan Booth Cohen saying that he told the men in prison that if they felt that men are so prohibited from crying that if they felt tears in the back of their eyes, it meant that they were crying and it counted. So
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
just
Wow.
hoping that it
I
doesn't have
feel-
to be that visible collapse. It can be
Yeah,
something you know
yeah,
is outside.
yeah. I mean, I think about it in terms, and I know we this is a theme for us quite some years ago, wasn't it, around race,
Yeah,
and that actually, if you can get just to the pure pain that's there for victim and perpetrator, it's such a profound movement, and it's so hard to get to.
oh, it's so hard. Yeah,
Really?
the
Yeah,
cycles of resentment are so protective.
yeah.
Yeah, so
And
self-re
the judgment and the blame and all that stuff. And of course, if you're a perpetrator, it's blaming the self and not being able to look and feeling shame and all those things. So it's to actually be able to look and look somebody in the eye. I mean, that's an enormous gift from Bert Hellinger, that to be able to see if you can get beyond that right and wrong split and actually just feel the pain together, of not being able to undo the past. All we can do is face into it now. Yeah.
I remember that one of the things you really appreciated over the years about Bert Hellinger was his directness, was his
Yeah.
the way that he spoke his truth. And I
Yeah.
wonder if it's with you in some way in your deepening journey.
I think so. I often think about him. Yeah. And interestingly, my trainees are fishing out all kinds of old videos and DVDs. Somebody wrote one and said, I found a very young Barbara, which is a bit unnerving, not a grey hair inside. I don't know how many years ago it was.
That's
So
so
yeah,
wonderful.
beware where you're on a video.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Mm.
yeah, there's lots of gems from him that are just lodged in here. And I always remember him saying, laughing at us, all of us making frantic notes, and saying, why are you doing that? You'll never look at them again, which is true. What you need to know will stay and will lodge in your brain somewhere. And I said, he's right. He's right.
Mm.
I've
Mm.
got these little gems that I draw on. They're nothing to do with what I've written down. I've written reams, and I've never opened any of those books. It's all in here.
Mm.
But I don't learn. I still make notes every now and then and stuff.
Well, yeah, and for some people it helps them remember. They never look at it again, but the action of the writing
Yeah.
helps the process and the digestion of.
Yes, I think the digestion is part of it, yeah. But he also had a kind of I'm doing that in my head. He had a line kind of melody to his voice that I feel lulled by, so it'd be very easy to go into this semi-conscious state. And I'm sure again the important things went in. I mean, this is another brain thing, isn't it? Like, I suppose that's into my right brain if I'm sort of moving away from consciousness and not thinking so much about it. So it's trust. It's trusting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
How have your trainings been these last 2 years or so? What's it been like for you? What have you been
Good.
find
Yeah,
find
good.
focus on in different ways than you did before. Is
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I haven't so consciously, so actively focused on race because what I realized I was doing was efforting, I was kind of pushing upstream, trying to recruit people, and it wasn't good for the energy of the group in the end, So I didn't do that for the last two times. I haven't done that. I just thought, trust the field. Who needs to
Uh-huh.
come will come, and who I'm ready for will come, So I've had a lot less people, brown body people. I had one person from India last time and one from Pakistan, interestingly. And the one from Pakistan was very into, asserting herself and all the rest of it. And the one from India wasn't. It's really interesting. He'd
Mm.
kind of, I don't know whether he thought about it afterwards, but he'd sort of buried his any kind of anger or resentment he might have had, about what the British did there. But yeah, and she was sort of, I mean, not bitter at all, but willing to stand her ground. And it was hard for her because she
Mm.
didn't have him as a companion and an ally in a way, so that made it quite hard. Yeah, so it's an onward journey for me. I mean, I'm learning all the time. Um,
Yes.
and it is I went off and did a 20-week course after, was it the last training or the one before, which helped me a lot. But it's an ongoing learning process, as you know. It doesn't stop just because you're a trainer, does it?
What kind of a 20-week course did you take?
It was run by a woman, I think she was from Nigeria. And we were basically looking at it was all white people, and she did another group for all black people, which I thought
Mm.
very good idea. She had one white woman there was her advocate.
Mm.
So she would look at how we were dealing with her, which was quite shocking at times, like, oh my God, yes, of course, that's what we're doing with you. And then she
Mm.
got us to do a lot of watching films, role playing, imagine on ourselves and was sort of being, I can remember one where it was a black employee and then your boss. And then there was a woman over here who was kind of in between. She was like the deputy director or something. She said, "Oh, don't worry," to the black guy. "I'll take care of that for you." So
Mm.
completely disempowered him. It was very interesting. The different ways that we try to make a difference, and actually, often we make it worse. Becoming
Yeah.
the rescuer or something like that. And where's the line between being an ally and a rescuer? So I think it's a hard path to navigate. And then she showed that film, 12 Years a Slave. Have you seen that film?
Yes.
I mean, I find it devastating, that film. It's really upsetting. And there's the scene she showed was where the authorities took these two kids from their mother, oh my God. And I was heartbroken. And I
Yeah.
was really angry in the group because they were all, and of course I was judging them, sitting there. I mean, they were affected, but I was going, why don't you feel emotional? What's going on? How come you're not reacting to that? I couldn't understand it. You
Yeah, I got after in the 3 weeks or whatever since the election in the United States, it's been 16 days or something. I've been just really working on integrating. And one of the ways that I've been working on integrating is to be watching films about the founding years of the United States.
Hounding years? What do you mean by that?
The founding
Oh,
years.
founding years, right. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, uh, John Adams. And I got really interested in Thomas Jefferson. And so I started a biography of watching a biography of Thomas Jefferson. And they were, he had slaves through the end of his life. He even would tell them that he was going to emancipate them, and then he didn't. And I was so upset.
My
You
goodness.
I was just so upset, and I just had to turn off the biography, and it took me 3 days, and because I protest, I mean,
Mm.
uh, in constellation work, we're always trying to be with what is. Well, sometimes I don't want to be with.
No, I understand that. I understand that. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my goodness me. Yeah.
It's interesting. I turned the biography back on,
Mm.
and the next thing they talked about was the number of times that he tried to put forward an official emancipation movement, a special, 4 or 5 different times he tried to get the Congress to emancipate Black people, to make slavery, enslavement illegal. And I was like, my head is still in a twist, just with the complexity of people and how we, how we try and how we fail and how we try and how we fail. And
Yeah. And fight for a cause and don't actually model it.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
interesting. And it's hard to do that with self-compassion, because we can't be all things to all people. And, we're none of us at the place where we have it all sorted,
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what our life's journey is about, isn't it? But it's
yeah.
having enough compassion for yourself at the same time as taking steps when you need to. Yeah. So does this segue us into Trump?
Oh, well, it may very well, and maybe we can go back and forth between truths and Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
so where are you with it?
well, well, the evolution has been that I thought, okay, I'm doing much better this time than I was the last time that it happened.
Hmm.
The last time that it happened, I was in a workshop with Elena Veselago, and the announcement came, and the room was devastated, all Americans. And Elena was like, please do not be devastated in my face. You know how many years of Putin I have put up with?
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
I do sort of, remember that. That was quite um, it was like an emblematic moment that we still exist as individuals within our authoritarian governments, if we happen to be within one. Um, that again, it's a little like Thomas Jefferson. I mean, it's a little like the riddle in the human brain between individual responsibility and collective responsibility. Like,
Mm,
my individual responsibility is that I voted against this man. My collective responsibility is that I am a citizen of the United States. And now I am, in some way, simply by my existence, complicit in this larger truth of like the body of people that I'm a part of has done this thing. And he's doing these things,
mm,
that are, um, I mean, this is one of the reasons that I've been watching all kinds of political drama and the founding fathers looking at the American Revolution is just to remind myself that, sanity and a dream of sanity exist. So because it makes my head whirl, the people that he's chosen and their um it's not like it would be more fun if he had just chosen random people off the street to be the Secretary of Education or you know, but the people that he's chosen have a proven track record of choosing their own enrichment over the whatever situation that they're in.
right. Right.
So it's like I just find it, I mean, it makes me dizzy, but I do find it really interesting. Like, what are we in a like if this is a constellation, which of course it always is, what what are we, yeah, what's this movement? This movement is a bewildering movement for me, but it seems important. How about you? What's happening for you?
Yeah, I mean, I had my previous opinion of Trump totally based on media. I have no direct experience. And I had my opinion of Robert Kennedy based on media, but also based on stuff that was censored by media. So, I had that as well. And then I decided to read his life story. And I thought, this man is really, he has our best interests, everybody's best interests at heart, so that's what I felt. And, he talked about the environmental side, and he'd had a very privileged life, but at the same time, loads of tragedy and
Yeah.
assassinations and all sorts of things. But one thing he did was he fought a long campaign to get the Hudson River, um, not purified, what's the word, rid of all the pollutions and that sort of stuff. And he succeeded, after a long battle. And when he said he was going alongside Trump, I was like, a bit like you, I had to do this like, what? You know? But then I saw, oh, this is a strategic move,
Mm.
because he didn't have any chance by himself, you know,
No, no,
and he,
no.
he couldn't even get the security he needed. I mean, there's all kinds of stories around that. Um, I thought, oh, okay, he's coming alongside him. He was disillusioned with the Democrats. I don't know all the detail of that. Um, because he's got a particular campaign of his own, and he's said, and Donald Trump is with me on that campaign, which is children's health. Well, great. I am very much in favor of promoting children's health. I want the best for my grandchildren. And if this man can do something about that with his power, um, go for it. So it's interesting, because I remember getting in real trouble in England when all the COVID stuff was happening because I posted something about Nigel Farage, who's a bit like Trump's equivalent in England. But he named these couple of truths, and I thought, oh, it's truth again, yeah. He's spot on with that. So
Mm.
I said, I posted this thing and said, I know, probably most of you are going to slam the door because it's Nigel Farage, but listen to what he's just said. So there's something about that for me. Let's get beyond the balling somebody up into, this kind of person and fixing them there. And that's just what constellations do. It's opening up the vista. Okay, maybe this man isn't all that the media said he is. I'm sure some of it is true, but maybe there's more to it than that. And I suppose with all the COVID stuff as well, I've seen there's a lot that the mainstream media say, and there's a lot that they don't say, and the truth is somewhere in all of that mix. And
Yeah,
how do you
yeah,
find it? How do you
yeah.
find it? In the end, you have to go to your right brain and
Yes,
your intuition, don't you? That's all you can rely on in the end.
yeah,
And that's difficult. At times it's really difficult. Well, this is a mess.
mm,
Where's the
yeah,
truth? Is this horrifying story true? Is that horrifying story true? So,
yeah, yeah.
so
And
that's where I am with it. Yeah.
yeah, it makes me think about Elena talking about how the field doesn't have health and well-being as its object.
No, definitely not. No. I mean, I've even seen some films of Putin, and I thought, oh, like I had to do that with him.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, maybe he's got a point, those sorts of things. I mean, it's healthy in a way because it does shake me out of my fixed impression of people.
yeah. And there's a, my most intense issue is like I just love the planet so much. I love the ecosystems. I love the I love the way the insects are set into the ecosystem. I love the bacteria and I love the history of viruses.
Yeah,
I love pollination. I love that they just discovered that there was a quality in some kind of lizard spit that helps to diagnose pancreatic cancer, for God's sake. And I'm just,
amazing.
we live in this sort of magical, awesome,
Yeah, yeah,
natural world.
yeah.
And I would love to have leaders that shared my awe and devotion and my prioritization of the preservation of the ecosystems over everything else.
Yeah,
That, that is my, big issue.
absolutely.
And
Yeah. Have you
and
read Robin Moore Kimmerer? You
yes,
know, oh,
yes, I'm in the middle of her Moss book right now.
right. It's amazing, isn't it?
And it makes me remember what it was like to be a little kid and to lie down on the ground in the forest and just imagine myself into the moss.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done all sorts of things like that as a child and lost touch with it. You know, we used to, I don't know, make a dinner out of mud water and chopping up leaves for cabbage and then putting rose petals in a jar of water to make rose perfume, all these things. And stones were mashed potatoes. I mean, there were no mashing of them, but they were. So we did a lot of that. And yeah, to be fascinated by
Yeah.
nature. And my first grandson, and my son as well, actually, walked so slowly because he was down on the ground every 2 minutes, studying an ant or a whatever it was. And fortunately, I had the time, that I could do that with him. And it was magical time for me. And I've never forgotten. Best 8 years of my life, that I had home with my children. Amazing, absolutely amazing.
And what did he become as an adult? What's his profession?
He's in computers. I wish, no, you didn't go down any of those routes, sadly.
My son used to sit underneath the grand piano at his grandmother's house. She would play and he would just sit there and listen to the vibrations.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
And
My granddaughter who's musical does do that.
he's
Yeah.
become a welder.
Yeah. You just never know, do you? You can't predict. I mean, it was interesting because he would be always wanting to get out of the pushchair and run, and he just loved nature. And my daughter never wanted to get out of the push. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, they both do love being out in nature. There's no doubt about that. But not to the same extent that I don't think they have the opportunities that we had. I mean, I've often talked to my brothers about this because we were out all the time in nature and adventuring, climbing trees and building, streams across paths across streams and, bending down and looking, catching minnows and.
Did you live in a forest?
No, we lived on the edge of a city, but we had open fields and hills beyond, so there was a lot of, yeah, space, a lot of space around us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting on my favorite hill, looking out across the hills, which I often did, and saying to myself, well, at least they can't build to the top of that hill. But they have.
Mm,
They have.
yeah.
I cannot believe it. And then I
Mm,
used to lie in meadows, you know, just listening to the bees, and the grass would be longer than me, so I was hidden completely. I'd spent hours doing that. And
mm,
now every time I see a meadow, I cry because there are so few. It just makes me cry.
yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
really sad that there's 95% have disappeared.
Um,
Can't bear it. But yeah, I mean, Robin Moore Kimmerer, bless her. I even wrote her and said, would she come to England? I thought, oh, grab the metal and ask her. But I got this kind of official response, which conference will it be part of? I thought, oh, no, I'm not in that league. I was
oh,
just
no.
going to ask her to come over and run a few workshops for us, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't pursue it because I thought she's a lot more famous than I've given her credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll do it, won't it?
Yeah, yeah.
My dismay is 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 that um the people that Trump has chosen are
Right.
both
Much
are,
about that. Mm,
are both climate deniers mostly,
right. Yeah.
and also very committed to fossil fuels, and very committed to also cutting down old growth forests in the United States. and harvesting the timber for private industry and
Right. Right.
yeah. So so in order to even stay sane, it's almost like I have to put it brings me tears, but I have to put all of that love in a bit of a bubble
Mm. Hmm.
in order not to just come to pieces with this movement, but
Mm.
stay, a little bit stepping into the constellation facilitator, place of like, okay, what's happening with this constellation?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't set up any constellations based on the state of the world at the moment, but it would be quite good to do actually, because
Yeah,
I've started asking questions about the climate, like, well, what is what they're doing to the skies? What's to do with that? Because for sure there are chemtrails up there. I can look up in the sky and I can see it, and I think that is not natural. What's happening up there? So you know, are they messing with the weather? Why are they messing the weather? If they are messing with the weather, how's that affecting climate change? If it is affecting climate change, I've got so many questions about it, and I don't know where I am with it all. It's the same thing. Like, well,
yeah,
what's the truth of
yeah.
all this?
Mm,
I'm in my little world. I can't see the big world. I don't know how much of this is true and to what level it's true. It's
yeah,
difficult.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wonder if, in some ways, as you're speaking, I'm wondering, does it help a little bit? Like when I was talking about stepping into the constellation facilitation space, like, okay, what's the movement? And I'm also very interested in what's the counter movement? Like,
Yeah.
here's this movement of, the movement of oligarchy, the movement of the wealthy, the movement of the billionaires, the movement of the enshrining of folks who prioritize their own personal gain over public well-being.
Yeah.
Um, and what will the counter movement be? Because it's here.
Yes, it is. It is
And so
definitely.
how will we see this? What will, yeah. So, but it sounds like when you step into that place of I don't know what's true.
Mm.
I can't trust the mainstream media. I haven't had personal contact. I wonder if it's a bit like this same kind of thing of stepping into the facilitation space of like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Sh- Show me what will come.
Mm. Yeah. That's helpful actually. Yes, to kind of, I mean, that's what we're doing all the time, isn't it, in constellations, just to stay with not knowing. Yeah.
Mm,
And I am aware what I'm doing is I'm looking into the world, if you like, for rescuers or somebody who's gonna make it all right, or that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah,
It's unrealistic,
yeah, yeah,
and probably quite childlike, But
yeah.
definitely looking for that, and I can see there's that guy, the German guy, Rainer Fulmich,
I know
who
him.
got VW, got a big case lawsuit against VW for something they did to their cars. And then he got the Deutsche Bank, some lawsuit against them for some fraudulent thing. And that man is in jail, you know,
Oh, oh,
because he stood out against what was
mm,
happening with COVID and everything. And he's in jail. And
mm,
apparently, is this true? He's in isolation. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard. Again, I'm pretty sure it's true that he's in jail. But
mm.
that's about all I know that is pretty much true. But again, I don't know for sure. It's just
Yeah, yeah. I live in the state of Washington in the United States, and it's the state that it did end up voting most for Kamala Harris. We had the highest percentage of votes for Kamala Harris.
right.
And we've had a governor for the last 10 years or so, 12 years, who um who is very, very methodically protective of both the environment and the people.
Mhm.
I just love him. And he started out in the primaries.
Right.
And, and I was devastated when he lost in the primaries for this
Yeah.
presidential election. I was like, he, how can we be turning, I mean, always, always like, why doesn't everyone think like me? Why don't we have a nation of Sarah Paytons?
Well, that's the truth spoken from the heart.
So
Yeah.
I had that devastation of losing his voice on a national level.
Mm.
I think this time around, part of what I'm able to perceive more. I mean, the first time Trump was elected, I spent 2 years combing the news every morning to look for someone who had voted for him who regretted it. And there was no one anywhere.
But
And when
you
I
know, this is,
personally,
sorry, go on.
no, I just thought I couldn't find it anywhere. It was like for some reason that was what I wanted, and there was not there anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I suppose that's the same. I mean, again, this is a hobby horse of mine. Like, what was true about that? Yeah. You know,
yeah,
it, I got to the point where I just thought I can't watch the news anymore. It's like I
yeah,
don't trust what I'm watching, with all the stuff that's happening in the Middle East.
yeah,
I'm in contact, well, I'm in contact with Nairman, who I think I've told you about. I was doing the online training with her, and I had two emails from her, and she was clearly very frightened because she said, please delete them immediately afterwards. But she said, it's 100 times worse than they're reporting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, it's like my trust goes then. I just think, well, I can't trust what you're telling me. Is that true? Is it
Yes,
true? You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I don't, I had to stop watching the news. I just found it too difficult. I would get angry, and then I go, is that true? Yelling at the radio.
Mm.
Because it's really hard to trust. That's the difficulty because of all these multiple truths that are around. It's
Yeah,
horrifying, horrifying. Yeah.
yeah. Layers and layers.
Layers and layers, yeah. And around the COVID stuff, I have found it difficult to know where I can speak my truth and where I can't. So that's layering as well, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay, this person I can probably say a certain amount to, and then, you know, I can't
yeah.
say more than that.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
the vaccination, anti-vaccination,
All of it. It's much bigger than that, yeah.
the sense of COVID as a movement of its own in this constellation of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And what they're apparently doing to our bodies. I mean, oh God. It's like a horror story.
mm,
And then I have to kind of balance all that and think, okay, just go for a walk, go and listen to the bird song or something, lie down on the grass. This is all I remember when I was writing one of my books, I can't remember which one it was now, waking up in the morning, and I did it as a poem in the end, at the beginning of my book, and hearing the bird song and thinking, okay, at least the world's okay if birds are still singing. That was a really profound moment for me. I thought, yes, you don't have
mm.
to be that frightened because the birds are still singing.
Uh,
Because
uh,
if they stop singing, we need to be worried.
well, here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, there was a terrible heat dome. Um, uh,
The heat dome, I don't know what that is.
it's a weather pattern within which the heat becomes very high in a certain geographic area. So our thermometers reached 115 uh, degrees. I mean, it was killing. It was visibly killing the plants and the animals and
Right,
the even the evergreen, even the pine trees. The You could see the needles dying on the part where at the end of the day the sun was at its hottest. So where the sun was going down, that side of the pine trees were brown and stayed brown for 3 years afterwards. And just this year, which is it's now 4 years later, I think at this point. Um, just this year, um, I could hear some of the birds that sang here before the heat dome.
Right, right,
And but even so, the Audubon Society in the United States reports, that the bird song, the birds are disappearing.
right.
So, I mean, it is that I love bird song is my favorite sound in the whole world.
Amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, and I listen to it over music. I mean, some people listen to music, and I open the window and listen to the birds.
yeah. I love it. I love it. There's just a corner where I walk along to my local park where I suppose it's mostly sort of brambly type stuff, and there's this cacophony of birdsong on this corner. It's so interesting. It's very concentrated in that one area. And my neighbor across the way pointed it out to me, and I said, "Oh, yes." I'd kind of heard it, but hadn't pinpointed it in that way. She said it's definitely concentrated in one particular corner, which must be to do with the plant life. But coming back to this dome, so is that man-made?
Well, it's an effect of fossil fuel use. Part of the reason that we're losing the birds is because of these. They occur in various parts of North America,
Right.
and when the heat gets so high, it just kills the animals and the birds and the plants.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
the
I mean, I'd heard another truth about 5G damaging the birds. Had you heard that?
oh, I
You
haven't heard.
these 5G masts.
Yeah. Well, we had the
So,
5G before the heat dome, and we have and my sense, and I know that there are heat dome areas, in other parts of the United States along the birds' migratory patterns. So my guess, just based on personal experience, is that the heat has
risen.
yeah has more to do with the decimation.
Mm. Have you done any constellations on any of the environmental stuff?
Um, I have not. I know
Right.
Bruce Naywith has done systemic constellations and did one before the last Trump election and then did one before this election
Oh,
and had such interesting things happen. Just like that, representatives would stand up and walk out of the room. They just couldn't stay in the constellation.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm feeling inspired to do a blind one and see.
Oh, yes. I've done the nature constellations with Francesca,
Mm, mm.
and those often speak to me of climate impacts.
Blind ones, do you mean?
They're blind. You know who you are,
Oh, okay, right.
but you don't
Different.
know who everybody else is, and then at the end, I think is how we did it. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I've done a few blind ones, but mostly we've done nature constellations. In the nature constellations module, we always do a
Yeah.
group, a group constellation, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I learned that from Francesca. But I did two or three on the COVID process, and that was a fascinating, fascinating process. And the main pandemic was fear.
Oh, yeah.
It was fear that was just running frantically through the constellation. They didn't know they represented fear, but that was the thing that stood out for me more than anything else. It was incredible. Yeah. So it's not always what you expect, is it?
No. No. Well, it looks like we're coming right to our end, I think.
We are, we are.
So
We've been on
interesting.
a fascinating journey, haven't we? Like this, yes.
Is it actually that? Did the time go so fast? I loved having this conversation with you, Barbara. I'm so happy to be with you. I think about her.
Lovely, yeah, yeah, and exploring our not knowings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I should think of you next time I listen to Robin Wall Kimmerer rather than
Oh,
read her mostly because she's got such a beautiful voice and she sort of seduces you into nature. It's so lovely. And she's now written another book, you know that? The
yeah, I have it on
Secret
my
Momentary.
My
soon.
list. Yes, I have it on my list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll
So
read it after I finish the Moss book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, now I can't look at moss the same way anymore. It's so interesting, you know. I was
All
like,
right.
oh, moss in my garden, you know. Okay, we need to finish.
Yes.
All
This
right.
is
Love to you. Lovely to
okay.
talk to you.
Lovely
Bye.
to you too. Okay. Love, love, love. Bye for
Bye.
now.
Bye.